As we've been hearing this morning, after decades of campaigning, more than 4,000 victims of the infected blood scandal are now going to get interim compensation of £100,000 each.
Well, let's talk about this in a little more detail now. We're joined by Kate Burt, Chief Executive of the Haemophilia Society. Morning to you, Kate Burt. Just first of all, your reaction to this announcement that we're talking about here on the programme this morning.
Well, good morning. This is a significant milestone. As you say, finally, after over 4 decades of fighting, the British government is finally accepting that compensation needs to be paid to those that have been infected through the biggest treatment disaster in NHS history. The haemophilia community has been devastated over these 4 decades and have had to fight and fight and fight to get to this first point of admission that compensation needs to be paid. And as you rightly said, this is just an interim payment, and it's a recognition that members of our community are dying every week and cannot wait for the infected blood inquiry to report next year.
What does it mean for the victims themselves? How will this interim payment help?
I think it's more a recognition, finally, that truth and justice is starting to emerge. Obviously, there are people who are in dire need of financial support, but it really is less about the money and more about the admission that the state has failed.
And obviously, as we've mentioned and you mentioned there, this is just an interim payment. What needs to happen when the report concludes?
Well, the government commissioned Sir Robert Francis QC to look into a compensation framework. They've had that report since the 14th of March. They finally commented on it this week. And we want the government to have no further delay in looking into a full infrastructure for compensation and support for the surviving infected, for their families, for parents who have lost children, for children who have lost parents who are not included in this interim payment, and that all 19 of Sir Robert's recommendations, of which this is only one, are fully committed to and start to be implemented when the inquiry reports next year.
Just want to pick up on that, what you're just saying there, because that's quite a significant omission in this latest announcement, this first announcement, isn't it? So there are loved ones, there are people who've lost loved ones who currently will not receive an interim payment at all.
Yes, I'm aware of a 95-year-old mother who has lost 2 of her sons, and she has never received any financial support from any of the existing schemes, and she is not included in this package. And that is tragic, but she will have to wait at least another year for recognition of her loss.
Do you think the government has done enough up until this point?
I think we welcome the fact that this government has made this announcement on compensation, but successive governments since the 1980s, when this tragedy started to emerge, frankly have obstructed and delayed and not admitted any liability. It took until 2017 for the then Prime Minister Theresa May to call the public inquiry. Our community has been fighting and fighting since the early 1980s for admission of what was done to them. And the cover-up is on an industrial scale.
And what has life been like for those people who've had to fight?
Well, people have lost loved ones, partners, children, parents. They've lost the ability to have families. HIV infected were unknowingly infected their own partners. Careers have been lost, and lives have been decimated in every way that you can imagine. And those losses are incalculable. So what price tag do you put on 40 years of loss and damage and stigma?
Kate Burt, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. That's Kate Burt from the Haemophilia Society. And of course, this is a story we will continue to talk about throughout the programme.